This is a update to my Manic-Depressive Man thesis. We're going to call this one Dow 13,000, a Manic-Depressive Man. The general theme stays the same with regard to my thesis about the global bipolar disorder, but the details change over time. And what we're looking at right now is, I'm afraid, a reversal from down 13,000, which struck as of last week, is anticipating World War III. I'm going to go over everything based upon charts. This time present the charts to try and explain my thesis and my arguments. But generally speaking, what one has to keep in mind is that man as a species is insane. Now, quite frankly, I hope I'm the crazy one, because if I'm right, there's not much of a future for us, so I prefer I be cuckoo and man be as rational and sane as the species likes to think is the case. I'm coming from a background in the study of economics, and in modern economic theory, the overriding hypothesis with regard to financial markets is that they are rational. And more specifically, there's what's called the efficient market hypothesis. Now, the efficient market hypothesis, let me pull this up. Okay. The efficient market hypothesis, the idea of rational markets, asserts that financial markets are informationally efficient. This is per Wikipedia. In consequence of this, one cannot consistently achieve returns in excess of average market returns on a risk-adjusted basis, given the information available at the time the investment is made. There are three versions of the market hypothesis: weak, semi-strong, and strong. The weak form efficient market hypothesis claims that prices on traded assets, stocks, bonds, etc., already reflect all publicly available information. There's no information in past price patterns or performance that would have any sort of prophetic influence on prediction of future prices. And since I'm coming across, I believe in the chartist perspective, that charts the stock market prices predict future price patterns, this is the weakest form of the efficient market hypothesis, is just delusional and insane. Now, keep in mind that the whole notion of the efficient market hypothesis is a justification that the market system is rational and optimal. And so, if you study economic theory and financial market theory, what's being postulated is that people engaging in self-interested behavior, firms engaging in self-interested behavior, that if we compete for the scarce resources within the world through perfect competition, what will eventually emerge is general equilibrium, and what they in economics they call Pareto optimality. But Pareto optimality implies maximum happiness for all. So the idea is that individuals being selfishly oriented, seeking to maximize utility, which is maximizing pleasure, engaging in mass hedonism, and businesses engaging in profit maximization, i.e. unrestrained greed, that through a system in which everybody seeks to maximize their pleasure and firms maximize profits, the competition in the system will generate a optimal outcome in the long run, which is general equilibrium and maximum happiness for all. Um, I believe that, in fact, what's going on is people are engaging in maximum selfishness, and firms are engaging in maximum greed, is not only not generating general equilibrium and maximum happiness for all, but what's actually been a consequence is general disequilibrium, and ultimately what we're facing is a grand supercycle collapse and crash in maximum unhappiness for all. So what's being taught in the context of secular science, which I believe is a delusional belief system, is the opposite of reality. So how is that playing out specifically, and what sort of counter hypothesis can I present? That's what the following my thesis is all about. And so in the context of my thesis, we just reversed from Dow 13,000, and I believe that this is anticipating a historical shock of massive proportions, which will be the utter upset of the secular beliefs and expectations. Secular beliefs and expectations, the contrary stance to that, I believe, is outlined in the Bible and in ancient prophecies with regard to the future. So whereas rational expectations and efficient market hypothesis is saying that we're headed towards general equilibrium and maximum happiness for all in the long run, in fact, I believe what we've been moving into is based upon a cyclical context, is the grand supercycle collapse in the form of an apocalyptic third world war, which is spelled out in the book of Revelation and prophecies regarding the end times, which are in the Bible. Of course, the secular world would poo-poo any notion that history is, in a sense, pre-written, and that we're sort of doomed to our own self-destructive fate by our own fallen nature. But the reality is that's actually what's unfolding. So the first thing to note is with regard to how history unfolds. And contrary to the secular perspective with regard to market efficiency and rational expectations, what we actually observe is that there's cycles within cycles within cycles. Joseph Schumpeter, in his classic text Business Cycles, outlines how there's the normal business cycle, but actually what we observe is that there's cycles within cycles within cycles. So there's 3 to 5 year business cycles, there's 8 to 12 year investment cycles, there's longer term agricultural cycles, and there's a 50 to 60 year long wave. And if you map that out, I'm showing the diagram with regard to cycles within cycles within cycles creates a distinctive pattern. Now I believe this pattern is what the R.N. Elliott discovered as the Elliott wave principle. He outlined how there's a fractal-based pattern that's observed in financial markets, specifically the stock market. The Elliott wave pattern has a pattern of 5-pattern upswing followed by a 3-pattern downswing that actually unfolds on a fractal basis, so that each cycle is within a cycle within a cycle, which gives rise to, as you can see, the ideal Elliott wave pattern format of 5 waves up, 3 waves down, but it's with regard to scale. So there's small cycles of 5 waves up, 3 waves down. There's larger cycles of 5 waves up, 3 waves down, and so this can carry out over the course of minutes, or it can carry out over the course of days, or it can carry out over the course of years, or it can carry out over the course of decades, or it can even carry out over the course of centuries. In this context, I believe that what we just reached is as purported by Robert Prechter, the Elliott wave theorist, and that is we just attained a grand supercycle top that was hundreds of years, if not thousands of years in the making, or 1,000 years in the making in terms of the millennium cycle. But the point is that the 5-wave up pattern in the past decade or so has completed, dating back to the end of the Dark Ages, and certainly the end of or the beginning of Pax Americana, the beginning of the rise of America to global hegemony. And this 5-wave pattern, so we can show is, 5-wave patterns up into, I put it as 2007, as when the stock market peaked above 14,000 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And we see 5 waves up from the on a millennial basis. You see it not in stock prices, but in the historical course of prices in general. And this chart that I'm showing you is based upon the general price level, and you see there's a distinct 5-wave up pattern to a top in recent history. Then if we take a look at a chart of the stock market where the British stock prices are meshed with U.S. stock prices, you had a massive correction into the beginning of the rise of America, the birth of America in 1776, with the opening of the stock market in 1789. And from the opening in the U.S. stock market in 1789, there's a 5-wave pattern up to a peak in recent history. And if you go from the low, which would have been a wave 4 low in 1932, that would bring the stock market rose in a 5-wave pattern to a peak in 2007. That is the super cycle, and after that we reverse course. Now, when we reverse course in 2007, we had the first major 5-wave pattern down, and that bottomed in March of 2009. That was the first wave down, I believe, in the grand supercycle collapse. A distinct 5-wave pattern to a low, and after that we began a retracement, a ABC pattern, 1, 2, 3, 3-wave pattern rebound that began in March of 2009, and that currently has reached a limit with regard to the uptrend line dating back to the whole supercycle rise from 1932. There's a trend line over the rise, and we've been struggling up against it in recent months, and now have reversed course from that mark. Now, the ultimate Elliott-Wave theorist, Robert Prechter, who pays attention to this, go to elliottwave.com to get the exhaustive analysis that they present with regard to how the Elliott-Wave principle unfolds, and that shows that the stock market just reversed course into what I call the apocalypse wave, because Robert Prechter, based upon the Elliott-Wave principle, is projecting that the stock market is going to fall over 90% from here, actually more like 99%. So that sort of collapse in stock prices begets the question of what could possibly cause that sort of collapse in stock prices. Now, with regard to what the Elliott-Wave principle means, the Elliott-Wave principle is based upon the notion that stock prices and the economy rise between extremes of optimism and extremes of pessimism. You have bull markets, which carry the stock market to highs, and bear markets, which carry stock prices to cyclical lows, and that these swings between mass optimism and mass pessimism are how the course of history unfolds. In this context, what I noticed was that there's a consistent pattern of major financial panics or crashes in mass mood occurring during the autumn. So this is very similar, and this is hence the basis of my thesis with regard to Manic-Depressive Man, is that the these wave swings in mass mood are consistent with swings in the mood of people who suffer from bipolar manic depressive insanity. And specifically, what we see is crashes and panics when we transition between the summer and the winter. So during the fall season is when you tend to get the real collapse into major depressions. And so I've got a chart up that shows how that looks for bipolar mental patients. And what we see in the following table is that the stock market seems to follow the same pattern, with the stock market being down on average in the May period or September-October period. So during the spring or the fall, these periods of seasonal transition is when you get major breaks in mass mood, just as you would get that sort of break in the mood of individual bipolar patients. Now, when we talk about the pattern of these breaks in mass mood, the crashes of 1929 and 1987 were incredibly similar. And in fact, what Chris Carolan, author of the Spiral Calendar, or developer of what's called the Spiral Calendar of mass behavior and mass mood, shows is that during the crash of 1929-1987, when overlaid based upon a lunar calendar, were actually precisely aligned. And in fact, the Hong Kong stock market crash in 1997 also aligned with this pattern of collapse in mass mood, and specifically occurs during the 7th lunar month, or on the Hebrew calendar, which is lunar based, in the month of Tishrei. And that pattern, amazingly, seems to be unfolding again this year, 2012, but this time around it's 1 lunar month behind the crashes in 1929 and 1987. So instead of the 7th lunar month, it is unfolding into the 8th lunar month. So what we see is this parallel crash pattern to 2000 and unfolding in 2012 that's parallel to 1987 and 1929. And as you see in this chart that Chris Carolan has pointed out, based upon the turning points on the lunar phase, were very precisely following it, relatively precisely following the same pattern. And this would suggest a crash into or around the time of the new moon on November 13th, which also happens to be a solar eclipse. Now, the 1929 stock market crash unfolded into a solar eclipse on November 1st. The 1987 stock market crash occurred in the wake of a solar eclipse on September 23rd of that year. And now, with regard to what could cause a crash at this point, this is where my Dow 11,000, Dow 12,000, Dow 13,000, my whole point with regard to psychological barriers in the stock market comes into play. Now, we were just reversed from Dow 13,000 last week. What I've been pointing out is that on prior occasions when we reversed from psychologically important 1,000 marks in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, things happen. For instance, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average reversed from the 1,000 mark in October of 1973, that's when the Arabs launched a surprise attack against Israel, and that that led to the OPEC oil embargo and a 40% drop in stock prices and a major recession in the economy. So when we reversed from Dow 1000 in 1973, it was followed by a historical shock in terms of an Arab-Israeli war, OPEC oil embargo, oil shock, and major recession. Similarly, in 1990, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average reversed from the 3,000 mark, it occurred when the Dow Jones Industrial Average went up and closed at 2,999.75 on July 16th and 17th of 1990, and then reversed course. When it reversed course, it did so in conjunction with Saddam Hussein threatening Kuwait. Then soon Saddam mass troops on Kuwait, the stock market fell 5%, and then Iraq invaded Kuwait, the stock market fell 25% in reaction to a oil shock at that time. So when we reversed from Dow 3000 in 1990, that came in the form of Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, an oil shock, and a historical shock at that juncture. And now finally another example of this was in September of 2001, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed decisively below the 10,000 mark on September 6th. And sure enough, right after that came the attacks on 9/11. So when I first heard about the attacks on 9/11, I was like, of course, the Dow just reversed from 10,000. Something was going to happen. There was going to be a major historical shock. So at the current juncture, we're reversing from Dow 13,000 and NASDAQ Composite reversing from 3,000 as of last week. The question is there going to be a historical shock that follows, and will this upset collective beliefs and expectations? Well, in this context, we're talking not just a normal potential stock market crash. It could be something of much greater proportion based upon what the Elliott wave principle is telling us, i.e. that we are now in the midst of a grand supercycle collapse, and that we reversed from the long-term trend line in recent weeks that really outlined the supercycle run-up and effectively the top to the grand supercycle in 2007. And if that's true, then what we could be looking at is effectively outlining the collapse of the United States of America. Now, what could possibly cause that? I believe that's what I foresaw back in the Gulf War in 1991, when I was corresponding with Robert Prechter, the Elliott wave theorist, on a regular basis, and I saw a special report of a chemical scud attack in Israel on TV that did not exist. It was completely normal. I was watching TV, and suddenly a special report came on with Tom Brokaw reporting that there was a Scud missile attack on Israel at the time, and that chemical weapons were involved. And I was very alarmed. I told everybody in my dorm room, better come and see. Saddam Hussein went and launched a chemical scud attack in Israel. This is February of 1991, after the Gulf War when the Gulf War was underway. And so everybody came around, and when we went through CNN and everything, there was no news of any attack on Israel. There was just regular news. And so what I saw did not exist. And the next day I checked the news wires, and sure enough, there was never a special report of a chemical scud attack in Israel at that time. A week or so after that, when I had a friend interested in Bible prophecy, I took him back to my dorm room to show him some books I had about ancient prophecies and Nostradamus. And at that time, I was familiar also with a prophecy from the 8th chapter of the book of Revelation, which I believe depicts a future nuclear war. So I started reading him that prophecy, and just as I started reading it to him, both of us heard an air raid siren followed by a nuclear explosion. The authenticity of the experience led us to charge out of the dorm room to the library, get into the sub-basement, where I called the fire department and asked them if there had been any explosions or alarms or anything, and the dispatcher didn't know what I was talking about. So the point was that I had one seemingly prophetic vision of a chemical scud attack in Israel, followed a week later by hearing an air raid siren and nuclear explosion. In the context of reading to a friend, the 8th chapter of the book of Revelation was a prophetic vision, an apocalyptic vision of a future nuclear war that was connected to these cycles. Now, it just so happens that it's been a long time, but as these cycles go, what I'm saying is at the current juncture, everything appears to be in place with regard to the Elliott wave patterns are completed. We're in the autumnal period. This grand supercycle crash could unfold right here, right now, and lo and behold, there's news out of the Middle East that Israel and Syria are starting to get into a bit of a fight with the insurgency in Syria, supposed insurgency, spilling over with mortars fired into Israel. Israel has started to retaliate, and that's like of just recent hours. For the first time, Israeli tanks responded directly at Syrian positions that were responsible for mortar fire. So the first time since 1973, we have shots fired between Israel and Syria in the Golan Heights region. And my guess would be that if the cycles and everything are correct, we're about to break into World War III and the ultimate upset of collective beliefs and expectations. So, in other words, at some point soon, we'll see the special report of a chemical scud attack in Israel, and it's World War III. So, as I said, I mean, bottom line is I hope I'm wrong. I hope that I'm crazy, that in fact I'm crazy, not the world, but I'm fairly certain that God was showing me correctly that the real case is my prophetic vision was accurate, and it's the species of man around me who's suffering from a major bipolar disorder, manic-depressive insanity, and is completely delusional, whereas I'm sane and in touch with reality, and God's showing me the truth. That's it.